Max McFarlane wants to know, how will technologies such as VR impact education? And will students being taught through online and digital medium, how might their intelligence be affected by teaching more through online and digital media? I like that question a lot. So my thoughts on education are, I guess, voluminous for no good reason other than that it interests me a lot. We say we care about education a lot. I don't think we do. And when I say me, I mean kind of, the body politic. We care about our own kids a lot, but I don't think we really care about education a lot. I think if we did, we would do a lot of things in the education system that are really, really, really different. We'd have it be more accountable. We'd have it be more experimental. We'd have it be more empirical. And we'd have it be, let me go back to experimental. So in answer to Max's question about VR, virtual reality specifically, I have no idea. I don't predict the future because I'm as bad at it as everybody else. But I do think there are things going on in education theory and in technology particularly that are really interesting. So there's a startup. It's now called New Classrooms. It started out called School of One, and it was a pilot project within the New York City Department of Education run by a guy named Joel Rose. And Joel Rose then took it private, now it's called New Classrooms. And their model, this is just one small example that I'm impressed with. Their model is to go into, let's say, a fifth grade math classroom. And, what's the standard model of education? A teacher and 20 or 30 kids in a room and some kind of chalkboard, whether it's digital or otherwise. And, it's often been said that if you went to sleep about 120, 150 years ago and woke up today, you would recognize very little about America or the rest of the world. Transportation's different, communication's different, on and on. But you'd recognize the school classroom. It's basically the same as it was then. A bunch of kids, a teacher, running things, right? And there's been some innovation and some use of technology and, best practices. But honestly, compared to other industries, and I know it makes people nervous to talk about education as an industry, but boy, if you look at the funding, it certainly is. And it's an important one because the ROI is massive. If you look at it as an industry, you see that the amount of innovation has been really, really low. So School of One, for instance, would say, we're going to take this classroom full of 30 kids, and instead of assuming that the best way to teach all 30 is to have all of them listen within the same at the exact same time to the same teacher telling them the same thing, well, maybe that's not optimal. What would happen if instead we created several different modes for each of those kids to learn and engage in? So maybe the teacher is leading a group. Maybe it's a small group lesson for kids who happen to learn well that way. Maybe some kids are learning one-on-one with a virtual tutor. Maybe some kids are in a peer-led group. Maybe some kids are using virtual reality. Maybe some kids are doing drills on their own. And School of One basically, or now called New Classrooms, basically takes this model, and every day you experiment with every kid learning the same material through different modes to see which mode that kid happens to learn best in. And then you have a test at the end of the day. That's how you know what mode works for each kid. And then the next day, your algorithm spits out a playlist for the following day to give each kid their own customized way of learning. It's very dependent on technology. In a good way, I would argue. It would make the role of the teacher, I would argue, even more important, although I think a lot of teachers fear that it would make them less important. And it does what, to me, almost every other facet of life has done, which is try to customize things, to work better for you. None of us want to walk into a store, whether it's virtual or real, virtual or brick and mortar, and have a choice of one thing. Here's a clothing store. Here's the coat we have today. Here's the shirt we have today. Here's the book for sale today. Here's the podcast to listen to. We all want choice. And it's not just about preference. It's about how we learn. And people are really different. And so I think that the more we can use technology and also just logic and data to customize to some degree the educational process, the better off we'll be. I think I've been talking for a really long time. I'm going to try to find one more question here that would be a good one to end on. We've been talking a little bit about education. All right, so I'll combine a couple. Here's Christina Nisheva, and Jill Bevan Craddock have questions. Christina asks, I'd love to know how to best teach kids to have critical thinking and ask unusual questions. So I love that question, Christina. And Jill wants to know, what's a great project for seventh graders to get excited about economics? So combining these two, I will say, first off, I'll start by saying I have no idea what's a great project for seventh graders to get excited about economics. And I would kind of go back to my previous answer, which is that, customization is really important. And so to that end, I'm a really big believer in letting people, whether it's adults, whether it's in your work career, whether it's people in their, obviously in their consumer choices, but even in education, I'm a big believer in letting people find the topics that they're fascinated by, almost addicted to, and then urge them to channel that fascination into learning a lot of different things using that topic or using that fascination. So one thing that strikes me as weird about school, the way we still do school, is we require every kid to be involved for many years in every subject, art, phys ed, and math, and English, and history. And obviously, you want to have everybody have a certain core base, but almost nobody's good at all these things. And the result of being in almost inevitably really bad at one or two is just to make you kind of hate the process, or make many people hate the process, especially boys. You see, the boys don't do very well in primary education often because there's just too much funneling and channeling your interest and your attention into things that are not interesting or that don't hold your attention. And then, of course, we blame them, which I think is crazy. So I do think it's great if you can, like I said, let people or lead people to find a topic or a curiosity that is legit, that's organic for them, and then use that to learn a lot about the rest of the world. And I think, if you're a good teacher, if you're a good parent, or just a good, adult, a thoughtful person, you can find a way to learn about so many different elements, so many different disciplines within one thing. So I'll give an example. My son, who's now 16, he doesn't like school very much. He does pretty well in some subjects, not so well in others. It's just not a great fit. I don't think he's ever going to be a great school student. On some dimensions, he's really, really smart. And on some dimensions, he's really, really interested. And so I do try to encourage him. So his big obsession for the past 5-6 years has been football, soccer, what we in America call soccer, which he calls football because he's kind of a snob that way. So he really, really, he reads a lot. Most of the books he reads for fun are about football. Most of the, journalism that he reads, I mean, he keeps up with politics and stuff more than, I think, pretty well for a 16-year-old kid. He does it a lot through comedy, by the way. Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Colbert, that's the way he gets a lot of his news, which I think is not a terrible way to get your news, because I don't know if I don't know if comedy about the news is actually any funnier than a lot of the real coverage about the news personally. So I'm personally pretty good with that. But then with football or soccer, also he and I do, it's gotten more occasional lately. It was more regular for a while, a podcast about him basically teaching me about footy called Footy for Two. And the amount that you can learn about the world through something like football, about economics and politics and language and society generally and how the media operates. So if you follow football closely as he does, I mean, you can learn all of this, and it's about as global as it gets. So that's what I would say to Christina and Jill and anyone who's looking for, kind of ways to, quote, teach kids to have critical thinking, ask unusual questions, or what's a great project to get seventh graders excited about something is, the excitement, try to find an organic excitement and then develop that and let it go as deep and wide as you can. For me as a kid, the topics that I learned about the world through were sports, which led to just, you learn a lot about different things, personality stuff, political stuff, on and on. Music I loved, but back then especially there was less kind of real good information about it. But to me, the hobby that I did, which is, super nerdy, whatever, but I loved, was stamp collecting. It's like when I was a kid collecting stamps, I didn't do it as a learning exercise. I did it for whatever reason. I thought it was really fun. to collect different pieces of colored paper from around the world. I just thought it was fun. I liked the organizing principle. I liked the hunting them down. But the amount that I learned way more about the world through stamp collecting than I ever learned through geography or even world history. I learned about economics. I learned about royalty. I learned about political upheaval. I learned about art, all this stuff through this thing that I happen to love. So I think that, look, the fact that you are listening to the Tim Ferriss Show indicates to me that you are a person who is deeply passionate about something beyond like having fun and getting pleasure out of life. And don't get me wrong, I think having fun and getting pleasure out of life are hugely important, and they're really what drive us at the end of the day. But I think the fact that you're listening to this also indicates that you have a real burning passion for something either vocational or career-wise or creative or artistic. And I think the more honest you can be about, the more honest you can be about doing what you love because you love it, and then try to harness and leverage that love. It's really hard to work hard on something you don't love and that you're not passionate about. I think a lot of us, especially early in our careers, we try to fake it, try to persuade ourselves, oh yeah, I really want to go into, investment banking because I think it's really interesting to get in there and learn about how companies work and da-da-da. Then you see a lot of people in fields like that where they go into them early, you find that really what they wanted to make a lot of money, which is fine. Money is hugely important, but you find that the passion doesn't match your energy. And so I think if you can align your passion and energy, you will work so hard and do so well that you'll become successful without even really noticing you're becoming successful because you're just doing it. You're just doing your thing. So Tim, thanks for having me. Tim Ferriss Show listeners, thanks for having me. I do hope you'll keep up with the work I do. Can follow Freakonomics stuff at Freakonomics Twitter and Facebook. The new show that I'm really excited about, if you couldn't tell, is called Tell Me Something I Don't Know. Hoping to get Tim back on it as a panelist soon. And I guess that's all I have to say.